Greetings and welcome to Jeremiah School Vlogucation. This video does not provide medical advice, nor is it intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician and/or qualified healthcare provider.
Wende Parsley with Jeremiah School Vlogucation. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about how to spot mild autism. Used to be called Asperger's or PDD-NOS. All of those are listed now in the DSM on the autism spectrum disorder. So I've been teaching since 1986, have a degree in education and a master's also in education, and extra certificates in reading, ESL, kindergarten, junior high science, and an all-level special ed certificate. But even though I've taught kids that have autism or fall on the autism spectrum, what really qualifies me to talk to you today about this is that we live with a child that's on the autism spectrum. He's our third son, and he was diagnosed initially with PDD-NOS when he was 4, and then a few years later we got a diagnosis of Asperger's or mild autism. And I want to talk to you today about how to spot that, because it's a little bit difficult to diagnose that or to spot it when it's mild. And the milder it is, the harder it is to spot, and the harder it is to diagnose. How to spot mild autism or Asperger's disorder. Autism in the United States is now 1 in every 45 children, starting with some stats. Boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed than girls, and the numbers given by the government or the CDC, which is actually a private for-profit entity, is higher than what's reported by the CDC or the government, because they use rather ambiguous reporting methods, which I'm not going to get into right now, but the experts actually report it as 1 in 45. There is supposedly no cure, although we've done some things with our kid that we've seen complete changes in him, and we continue to see that. He is growing and changing and maturing in ways that we were told by experts was not possible. Autism is linked to certain genetic mutations: MTHFR, CBS, COMT, CHD8, and the MET genetic mutations. Apparently, depending on the severity, whether the child is male or female, and the IQ of the child, and whether the genetic mutations come from one or both parents, has to do with the severity of the autism spectrum disorder. So our kiddo has the MTHFR, the CBS, and the COMT, all homozygous, meaning that he got that from both of his birth parents. The less severe autism spectrum disorder, the harder it is to diagnose. So you're going to see lots of behaviors that just make the child look difficult to handle. Probably you're going to have a lot of misdiagnoses in there before you actually figure it out. And maybe it's the expert, quote unquote, experts that you go to do the diagnosis that makes a difference. So in toddlers, no babbling by age 1 year. Now, we actually, with our kiddo, saw some babbling, but when he got to be 16, 18 months, he had some single words, but we were about the only people that could understand them, and none of them were precise on the words. They were approximations. No 2-word phrases by age 2. They don't respond to their name. And we had this a lot. We actually took our kid to have his hearing tested because we thought he was hard of hearing. His hearing was fine. Loss of language skills. So these are the kids that start talking, they're babbling, they look really intelligent, they're walking, they're interacting, they're doing all of these things, and then all of a sudden they start regressing. And that's a really big deal. Of course, that's pretty easy to spot. We did not have that. We did have poor eye contact, and it's very common for babies to stare at the mother's faces or eyes when you're holding them and feeding them. And maybe not everybody's face, but definitely they won't stare at the mother's face and eyes. You won't see that if they're on the autism spectrum disorder. They do not smile necessarily when they're smiled at, and babies really young, you smile at them, they smile back. Our kid didn't do that. No social responsiveness. This is beyond being just shy. It looks a little antisocial, and as they get older, it looks more and more antisocial because they reach it. They're shy, they go through a shy period. All kids do, but they reach an age where they kind of start working through that. With autism spectrum, they don't necessarily. Lots of issues with tastes or textures. Abnormal gag reflex is a huge problem. Our kid loved potatoes, French fried, mashed potatoes, all kinds of potatoes, but he could not swallow them. He liked the way they tasted, so he would chew them up and then spit them out. Progressing on to young children, they use few gestures when they talk. They tend to speak with their arms down at their sides, sometimes have a flat robot-like voice. They sometimes struggle to make friends. We have practiced with our kiddo meeting people, and so he knows how to meet people and kind of strike up conversations and that sort of thing. But maintaining friends has been a huge issue because that's much harder to coach. So there's an impaired ability to converse with other people, and that is where that plays in. They make friends, but they can't keep them. Also, they have trouble playing pretending games, making noises that go with the toys and things like that. Sometimes there's repetitive or unusual language echoing back what people say, or just repeating the same information over and over and over to different people. There can be a preoccupation with certain objects, like carrying them around or lining them up. With our kiddo, we noticed a lot that he wanted to carry things in his hand, but he didn't necessarily play with them. There's either an inflexible adherence to rules or rituals, or sometimes they pay no attention to them at all. But this causes huge meltdowns when you change anything. It could be that you just tell them to do something and that's not what they think should happen. So it's not necessarily a ritual or a routine, except in their mind. And then there's a huge meltdown, at which time they can't be comforted. You try holding them, rocking them, speaking softly, trying to talk them through it, and nothing works. They're just irate. They a lot of time want to be alone, and this includes when you have company over, or there's friends there, or just with the family that they're familiar with, and you're playing games or watching a family movie, and all of that stimulation was just too much, and he would prefer to be in his room under his bed. They are upset by changes. Again, that causes huge meltdowns. They may think that they want to go swimming, and you didn't tell them they were going swimming, and they are going to go swimming, going to go swimming. No, we're not going swimming. And when they actually realize that you're not going swimming, huge, unconsolable meltdown. When the children, as they get older, there's a lot of talking about their preferred topic. So it's whatever they're into at the time, like Nerf guns. Anybody that comes along, we only want to talk about Nerf guns. It doesn't matter what the conversation is about. And he's 10 now, our kid, and should really be able to start picking up on some joining into conversations and talking about what other people want to talk about. But he struggles a lot with that and wants to just interrupt and talk about whatever he's obsessed with that particular day. So he's obsessed with certain things and then abandons them suddenly. So you might hear about Nerf guns for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden, bam, we're not into that anymore. We want to talk about Pokemon or something like that. Now we're obsessed with that, and that maybe lasts about 3 weeks. There's an again, even with the older children, inflexible adherence to rituals or routines, whether they're actual routines or just what they think in their head should be going on. Prefer to be in a safe place. Our kiddo prefers dogs to people a lot, wants to go to a safe place and be alone a lot. Even when it would seem like joining the family would be a good thing, an exciting thing, a fun thing, it's too much. Facial expressions are not necessarily appropriate for the situation. So, for instance, he wants a gift. Let's say he asks for something for Christmas and he gets the very thing he asks for, but there's no facial expression to reflect that. So you look at him and think, wow, does he not like this? What happened? No, he's excited about it, but the face doesn't match. And so within that, he struggles to read facial expressions of other people. If you have him look at pictures and say, what's that person feeling? A lot of times he will mislabel that or just shrug his shoulders. He can't predict. Some of the obvious ones now, like happy, sad, angry, he can get those now, but for a long time couldn't identify that at all. Upset by changes. So even though it's something that you've said, hey, we're going to read a book and then we're going to go to the grocery store. Okay. Then you read the book and then you say, okay, now we're going to the grocery store. What? That's because in his mind, that is not what he thought he wanted to do at that particular moment. So there's trouble with the planning and putting all of that information together. Trouble understanding emotions, period, in himself. It would be a situation that should be exciting, like we're getting ready to go on vacation, but he looks angry, running around, yelling, punching his brothers, this sort of thing. And you'd say, wait, we're going on vacation. Aren't you excited about this? He didn't know. So no matter what the situation was or what he was dealing with, he looked angry a lot until we figured out a way to make hand signals for him that would explain what he was feeling at that particular time, and then outline for him appropriate behavior that went with different emotions. So bump bump shump became excited. When you're excited, people jump up and down, they squeal, but they don't punch their brothers, and we had to really be that specific. Other symptoms that kind of show up at all ages are hyperactivity. And a lot of these kids get diagnosed as ADHD. We've had that label also. Impulsivity goes with that. He couldn't sit down for meals, couldn't explain what was going on with him. He'd be hungry, but he didn't want to eat because he didn't want to sit down, or he'd take 2 bites and then he'd go run. So a lot of times he just eats standing up, but at least he eats. With the impulsivity, he can explain why something is wrong, what the good decision is, what you should do, what the consequences are, what the wrong thing is, and then we'll go and do the very thing that he said you should not do. Just absolutely cannot, and it is getting better, but for a long time absolutely could not control those impulses. Attention span, we could not get him to sit down, like sit in your lap, read a book, none of that. Didn't want to tune into story time until about age 9, I think. So it was a really difficult time of me following him around, reading books to him while he ran around the house. But he didn't want to hear any of that. There was also a lot of aggression, and partially because he couldn't identify his emotions, that when he'd be excited or worried about his brother's concern, it always came out as aggression towards them. A lot of kiddos have self-injury, banging their head on the floor, biting themselves, that sort of thing. We haven't had too much of that. His aggression was always pretty much towards the family. There have been temper tantrums, and I'm not talking about small temper tantrums. I'm talking about temper tantrums that last for hours. Meltdowns, crying, screaming, unconsolable for hours. There's unusual eating or sleeping habits where they want the same food every day. Every day we want oatmeal with bananas in it for years until we don't, and then we hate that. Right now we want pancakes almost every morning. So we kind of try to bring some new foods in to go with the pancakes to get us to branch out, but melatonin, he has to have melatonin to sleep, although I will say that he's down 75% on what he used to have to take to sleep and sleep through the night. Unusual moods, he will completely, and this is so much better, all of this with the temper tantrums and the meltdowns and all of that, so much better. Overreacts to things and then totally forgets what happened. Just like a light switch went off, flipping out, and then bam, we're perfectly happy. Hey, look at this, after we've just screamed at someone. But then you see this other thing where he'll hang on to stuff and then keep bringing it up, keep bringing it up, keep bringing it up. And just be just as angry as he was the first time it happened. Well, then there's either a lack of fear or extreme fear or a combination of the two. We have a combination of the two. Anthony would gladly jump off of a roof, but he's afraid to go down the hall by himself. This is also better, but during the daytime did not want to go down the hall to his bedroom, said he was scared, but he would climb to the top of the tallest tree with no qualms whatsoever. These kids have unusual reactions to different sensory input, fluorescent lights, and I've had other kids that I've worked with tell me that they could hear the buzzing of the lights. They could hear the motor on a refrigerator. They could hear the microwave making sounds even when it wasn't on. The smell of vinegar makes Anthony throw up. Music, we could not play music for years. We can now, but it was too loud, too much sensory input. Any loud noises or sounds just sent him screaming. And that's the sensory piece of it, that it was just too much input and it just made him feel panicked. So it threw him over into that fight, flight, or freeze, and his preference would be fight. Digestive issues, they tend to be constipated or have diarrhea a lot because a lot of the genetic mutations that they have kind of affect their digestive system. And with us, we've changed the diet and done a whole lot of stuff there that's really helped with that issue, which has helped with a whole lot of the other things with the brain chemistry. A lot of these kids are overly organized. They want their new things. Anthony wants his new things organized, goes to great lengths to organize them and put them all in their place. 2 days later, they will be all over the floor. Messy, completely unorganized, destructive. So as soon as the thrill is gone with the new thing or whatever it was that was a complete treasure that he'll save his allowance for 2 weeks to buy, 3 weeks, whatever, you find it in the yard, the dogs chewed it up. Now, how do you get an actual diagnosis? Because there are services that are available to really help these kids, and for you to know where to start and what to do next, it matters. But sometimes it's really hard to get a diagnosis. You need a team. You need a psychologist or a counselor. Neurologists are great for that. Speech therapists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists are invaluable. They work with these kids all the time. They know what they're looking at. I would really recommend that you not just use a pediatrician, because a lot of times they either don't spend enough time with your kid to be able to accurately diagnose it, or they haven't seen enough of those kids. They don't recognize it, so they don't know exactly what's going on. And the milder they are, like I said, the harder it is to spot. The other place you need to start is ruling out sensory processing disorder, because a lot of times that can look like autism, but it's not. And when you deal with the sensory processing disorder, suddenly a lot of pieces fall into place. With autism, when you do the sensory therapy programs, it helps tremendously, but it doesn't take care of it all. You get a diagnosis of this from an occupational therapist. That's where you would start with that. Also, rule out hearing impairment, because that can also look like autism spectrum disorder, mild. And we ruled that out years ago only because we actually thought he was hearing impaired. Treatments, the reason it is so important to know about this and to have this information and to watch your kiddos is because the sooner you get the treatments, the better. We didn't get our first diagnosis. We knew something was wrong. We didn't know what was wrong. And when we first got the PDD-NOS diagnosis, he was 4. And we didn't get the autism diagnosis until he was 8. So, not that we weren't working on some things, but there were some therapies there that would have been more helpful had we gotten them earlier. And we really want to pass this on to help other people to maybe get some help sooner than we did. So with the sensory issues, you'll go to an occupational therapist. For social cues, facial expressions, reading emotions, all of those things, speech therapists work on that. Social interactions, occupational therapists and speech therapists and counselors work on that. Our kiddo actually goes to, we call it a play group, where all the kids in there are mild autism, Asperger's, whatever you want to call them, and they work together in a group setting with an occupational therapist and a speech therapist to kind of practice these things, and it's helped tremendously as well. Help handling emotions, you need a good counselor, not just a counselor, any counselor out of the phone book. You need to find one that works with children and has experience with children that are on the autism spectrum. Help with the compliance and attention and impulsivity and social interactions. ABA, which is Applied Behavioral Analysis Therapist. And they actually are popping up everywhere, incredibly expensive, but I dare say worth every penny because they really know what they're doing. It's possible to watch some videos on some of those things and to maybe meet with an ABA therapist, have them work with your child and give you suggestions on things that you can do at home to help to get you started, if the money is an issue, because a lot of times insurance doesn't cover it. I really, really hope that this helps, and I hope that mostly you get a sense from this that there's hope. There's hope. Don't let anybody tell you that your kid can't be helped or that they're going to end up with more serious diagnoses, that they're going to need to take medication forever, that they're going to be in and out of mental institutions. Don't listen to that if that's what you've been told. You can help your kid. God didn't send them here to just be stuck in that place. So don't give up. And we will have more videos that kind of break this information down and give you some more tips on what you can do and how you can help and where you can find help. So tune in and subscribe. And if you have any questions, post those below, because we would love to be of more help to anyone out there.